Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to regular council meeting of July 18th, 2023. I note for interest that today is the anniversary of the birth of Nelson Mandela. So for those who draw inspiration in such leadership, today is a day for celebration. With that, I call this meeting to order. Councillors, you have before you today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes made to the agenda? Councillor Demona.
Well, while you are on the note of noting the date, how close are we to our incorporation anniversary?
2 days away.
2 days away, so we won't be in session at the time, but that's a good thing to remember too. So we're at 22, 21, 22 years.
All right.
That's good. Well, with that, I would like to add an item for discussion under new business. I believe it could go under 6.4, not to add to our received short day today. Just an item for discussion. I think we can call it the transportation contract.
A matter for discussion. Thank you, Councillor Demota. Any other proposed changes to today's agenda? I will put it. I have a motion from Councillor Demota to amend today's agenda to include item 6.4, discussion regarding the transportation contract.
Sure.
Okay. I will call that question on the amendment. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And may I have a motion then from a councillor to approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended? Councillor Glasser, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have before us for approval today 2 sets of minutes. First, the minutes of the regular meeting of July 4th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, may I have a motion, please, to have council approve the minutes of the July 4th, 2023 regular council meeting as presented? Councillor Melnick, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have before us as well the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of July 11th. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? I had one question. It's not a question of the accuracy of the minutes, but just my understanding. For the matter where I recused myself for conflict, there is a motion that council appoint Councillor Wilson on an interim basis. Can anybody give me advice as to what that interim period might be or what that means?
Oh, there we go. Yes, we didn't want to commit to another board without having a conversation at organization meeting and also budget, just in case it affects budget or yeah. So we were going to have a more wholesome conversation, but we also didn't want to miss out on the inaugural meeting and meetings to follow because I think they're trying to get some headway in the next few months, and we just wanted to be a part of that, and then we can have that conversation. So I would say until November.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor, well, actually, you're good. Councillor Demota.
Oh, I agree. I did. Sorry. I do have a question on that. And it's kind of reflective on the conversation that you and I just had about approving the minutes and observing them as accurate if we decided to go forward. And I'm kind of in a dilemma because of the agenda item that I'm bringing up, because if we have a discussion after the fact, then, you know, I do understand that whatever occurred at the meeting, we're recording is accurate, but if for some reason we were offside with our motion, would it again be offside of approving the minutes as they stand?
I believe I understand your question, and I think the two are independent. So the motion for us, maybe we're not there yet, I've asked for a motion, is to approve the minutes, and are they an accurate reflection of what occurred? But I understand that you may want to raise an issue about whether that was a proper motion, but the minutes simply reflect what took place, so I think they are different from that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, I will return again. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion to approve the minutes of the July 11, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented? Thank you. Councillor Hall, all those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 4, correspondence. There is a letter from a resident regarding paid parking, which is on the agenda. Council wish to discuss that letter at all? Mr. Given?
Your Worship, the letter was received in accordance with our correspondence policy, and so it's presented here for council. The resident explicitly wanted to have it forwarded to a council agenda. Director Nadon is here and can maybe speak to a few of the nuances with respect to how the program has been operated in the past, and because the perception of the resident may not be exactly in line with how the program has been or is being run. And Director Nadon can kind of speak to some of those items, just so the council is aware of the full context that goes along with the residents' perception and concerns that they raise.
Thank you, CEO Given. The clarifications administration wish to bring forward with respect to this piece of correspondence is that just the evolution of the restrictions in place on Geeky Street, 500 block, which is just across the street here. And in essence, when the pilot program started in 2021, the only areas that were paid parking was on street downtown and the 2-hour segments. So immediately on Patricia and Connaught, and that what we commonly refer to as the downtown core. And then in 2022 is when we had our first permanent iteration of the paid parking program. And then it expanded to include Geeky Street in its entirety, as well as parking lots and the zone that was part of the pilot in 2021. So in 2021, the residential side of Geeky Street was residential only, because none of it was paid parking. And then in 2022, when we shifted to a permanent program, the entirety of Geeky Street became paid parking. So there's a bit of a nuance there in what happened when is what we wanted to bring forward. And also in relation to the residential permit zones versus the paid parking zones, this specific resident would be in the same situation as someone who lives in an apartment on the 2nd floor of Patricia Street, for example. So this resident is within the paid parking zone. And so there were nuances around, why is the 300 block of Geeky by residential permit only? And the reason for it is that it's not part of the paid parking zone. It's considered to be outside of the downtown core, but adjacent. So recognizing that there might be competition for parking here. But so effectively turning, saying yes to the request or turning this part of Geeky Street into residential only would remove a paid parking area that is currently in place, so therefore affect our revenue. And so that's the nuance there that wasn't quite clear in the letter, but that we wanted to bring forward.
Thank you for that, Mr. Don. Anything from council, Councillor Demota?
Well, just to get some more clarity for the intent of this letter, through your worship, to Ms. Nadal, like, are you receiving this? Is the person frustrated because they're competing with parking and they don't get charged, they don't have to pay if you have a resident permit there, correct? So, and isn't, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but isn't the whole concept of having paid parking to not have motorhomes in front of your house and generators going off at odd hours? I'm not understanding what's intended here, and maybe just some clarification on your reception of that.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Demota. Indeed, there are a few other items that are raised in the letter that are not directly related to paid parking. So illegal camping, for example, it doesn't matter whether you're in a paid parking zone or not. There's a no camping restriction in town, and so those concerns would be best directed to bylaw directly. So calling the duty phone and reporting instances of illegal camping is a separate issue than paid parking, indeed.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director Nadon. What are the hours of the duty phone? Is that a 24-hour service, or is that a regular time when the parking is enforced?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Melnick, I will not give away the trade secrets of our bylaw enforcement, but at most hours of the day, there is someone on shift, so 7 days a week, extended hours. Paid parking is in effect from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., so we do not have 12-hour shifts. I'll reveal that much. But certainly at most hours of the day, there's someone 7 days a week answering the duty phone. And if emergencies occur after hours or other ways to report, it would be through other notifications to first responders, so calling dispatch essentially, and I mean 911 if the situation warrants it. But and effectively the RCMP provides coverage when bylaw is not on shift, but as we know, they are busy and pulled in many different directions. But yeah.
I'm good.
If there are no other comments, go ahead, Councillor Demota.
Just another clarifying matter here in the letter, just on the note of extended parking. Am I not to believe that in that area, it's still only 2 hours maximum through user? Okay.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Demota, and I apologize for not addressing it in my previous answer. So we have a bylaw against camping, so that's where the inquiry should be directed. Geeky Street does not have a time limit. And it is not part of the restriction for RVs. So RVs can actually park on Geeky Street as long as they pay between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. They are not in infraction of any other municipal bylaw. So 7.5 meters is the rule, but that's for downtown, and Geeky Street is not considered part of that restriction. So RVs parked in front of our house for extended periods of time, there's no, as long as they pay for paid parking, there's no rule against that.
Right. And that's that, would the $15 a day apply there, or is that just in parking lots only?
Councillor Demota, it would be a better use of dollars to park in a parking lot, indeed. An RV who decides, or any vehicle who wants to park all day on Geeky Street, would be subject to $3 an hour from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., which would be more than $15 a day.
Thank you very much for that, and maybe just back at council, another opportunity to review as we, try to make this better as we go along. It's definitely worth having a discussion on whether, that we're making most effective use of our parking space in the community. So I'm glad to skip forward anyway. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I know this is the first letter we've received, but have you in administration received any feedback like this regarding residents in their zones and not being able to park?
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Hall, I think it's the first one this year. We've certainly heard from residents in the downtown core, so mainly Patricia and Connaught, when the program came into place. And our resident exemption at the time weren't quite what they are now. And we recognized that that was causing hardship. So one is the availability of parking, which there's not much we can resolve there, but certainly ensuring that residents have the right permits and they can just park as close as possible to their residences. That was addressed in previous years.
I appreciate, Mr. Don, that the letter came to the info at Jasper address. It is addressed to mayor and council, so it's appropriately here. Is there any intent for administration to respond to the letter, or do you leave that?
Mayor Ireland, at this stage, the letter came to council because it was addressed as such, met the requirements for a policy as CEO given outlined, and that's why it's here. Certainly a directive from council to direct administration to reply to the sender, I think would be appropriate and would probably be in a better position to explain the details that I just laid out in writing.
I quite agree. And so I know there is a proposed motion to receive the correspondence, but I'm going to suggest that a councillor might want to add and council direct administration to respond to the letter writer. I think administration can do a better job, but I think the letter writer is entitled to a response. And as Councillor DeMotta indicated, it's worthwhile for council to discuss these matters, have them brought forward. So I think we should credit the letter writer for the observations and respond appropriately based on all the information that you shared with us. Councillor DeMotta.
Well, then just to finish it off, the request is to consider returning to the residential side of the 500 block of Kiki Street to parking by residential permit only as soon as possible. So how do we interpret that? And again, if this is addressed to mayor and council, is it appropriate to have administration respond back to it? They're asking us a question, you and us.
But I believe it's certainly appropriate for us to direct administration on our behalf to respond.
Okay.
I think Ms. Madon can articulate the response she gave us better than I can do. So I think it's a fair way to deal with it. As for the other part, if there is a councillor who wishes to have us reconsider the configuration of paid parking, that's a motion that a councillor can make. But we have the opportunity to leave that to councillors.
Well, I think it's a worthwhile discussion. Oh, sorry if I may, Worship. I think it's a worthwhile discussion, and because we only received this really on Friday and had the weekend to consider it, and not have a group session. There's other things to talk about today, but I mean, it doesn't mean that we can't review it when we come back in August and September. But how effective are we already? If there's still half of the season left, or a good chunk, then maybe it'd be worthwhile considering. So meeting here today, I think if someone wants to bring it up for a future committee of the whole, I think it would be up to that person.
Councillor Nally.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I have a question to perhaps Director Nadon can assist. The references in the letter are to the 300 block of Geeky and the 500 block of Geeky. But can you clarify, I take it the 400 block of Geeky is paid parking, as is the 600 block?
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Melnick. The 500 and the 600 block of Geeky are paid parking. The 700 block is not, neither is the 300.
And I guess the 500 block is appropriate because of the Robson Park right there. But it does beg the question, if we're looking at one specific block and reviewing it, we probably should review the 400 block and the 600 block. Because by the arguments in the letter here, if we are going to reconsider residential parking for one block, we should probably do it for the residents on all those blocks.
Go ahead.
Your worship, not to comment on the specifics of what should be done, just to provide some advice that this may be a question of when should this be discussed. And council might wish to discuss at the conclusion of this season's operational period for the program. Certainly as administration, we always look to consider, how things went, what could be learned, what might need to be changed. And so maybe this is an item that council might wish to refer to a committee of the whole meeting following the conclusion of the 2023 paid parking program. That would give you a chance to say, okay, we've heard this, we acknowledge receipt, and we will discuss this at a time when we're considering making adjustments to the program, which would be after the operational period. So again, not any particular comment on the merits, but just sort of a when you might want to do this, because I think that future committee of the whole meeting, like Councillor Demoda referenced, may be one that's on the conclusion of this.
Councillor Hall and then Councillor Demoda.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I do think we should see this program through to the end, and I'm glad this came to us because it is a pretty new program, and we're still working out kinks. And I am actually also very happy to see this resident appreciates paid parking and the benefits to our town. But I think it should be. I think we just need to see this the full season duration and discuss it after.
Councillor Demoda.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Your Worship, and I completely agree, and I like the recommendation that came from CEO Given. We did have a lot of extensive debate on the areas of the change of things, the rates and where the new zones were going to be in the changes. So I think the most appropriate and as soon as possible time would be from at the end of seeing the full season through, because I think the only benefit we'll see is the overall benefit to the community. And I know that some residents are going to be adversely affected in some ways, and we're not going to get it right every single time we go through these changes. But I like the fact that, people are contributing, what they're seeing in the community and helping us, get guidance and going in the best direction we can. So I'll go with that recommendation. Thank you.
Mike, I have a motion. Someone. Councillor Milner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm prepared to make the motion that council receive the correspondence for information and that council direct administration to respond to the resident with the appropriate paid parking rationale.
Thank you for that. Councillor Milner, is there any debate? Call question, all those in favor? Are none opposed? That is carried. Is there any intent to do a motion to add this to a future committee meeting at the end of the season? Or go ahead, Councillor Wasser.
I was just working on developing a motion that this matter come back, that council direct administration to bring this matter back to the discussion on paid parking at the conclusion of the 2023 year.
Thank you for that, Councillor Waxer and Mr. Given on behalf of the administration. That's clear enough direction. So the matter will come back sometime after the close of the parking season. Any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That was carried. That takes us to agenda item 5, delegations, and we do in fact have a delegation before us today from the Jasper Heritage Blues Society, and I understand we have Krista Laughlin and Carol at the end. So welcome, ladies. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'm Krista Laughlin. I'm the treasurer of the Jasper Heritage Folk and Blues Society. This is Carol Bien. She's one of our sponsorship coordinators. So this year, we're asking for the field and the tables and chairs, the cost of those things to be waived for the festival. And then for future funding support at a value of $20,000. And we've summarized the costs that are related to children's performing and offerings, as well as volunteer expenses. We're kind of ongoing working to increase funding through all kinds of different venues towards entertainment and all costs, such as music and performers, as well as other things in the field for that weekend. And also trying to keep ticket prices affordable for families. So that's where we're looking towards events for children and offerings for children at the festival. So, did you have anything you wanted to? Okay. So any questions about what we've put forward?
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson.
I would just maybe ask, could you give us a brief kind of history of who you guys are, how long you've been around, just for the record, just so there are people that are going to watch this, and it's always good to kind of get a plug in rather than just maybe be here asking. Just again, it's in your letter,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't read the agenda; they're watching on YouTube, and so yeah.
So the Jasper Heritage Folk and Blues Society, I'm not actually sure how long it's been around. I've been part of it for 5 or 6 years now as the treasurer. But we run music events, primarily the folk festival that's held in September. And we do that each year. So it has been for quite a while now. I don't know when it started.
I believe it's been 10 years in this format.
And it's completely volunteer run. So there's no paid employees or people involved. It's all the money that comes into the festival goes back into the festival, as well as operating costs for other music events when we're able to hold them, or fundraising events.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments? I might be Gil, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have one question regarding revenues and so on, and I noted that I don't see any grant money or grant revenues, which may or may not be available for performers and events. Does the society apply for grants from either the federal or provincial government?
Yeah, we applied for the CIP grant.
I think you need to press your button.
It went
There you
on.
go. I think you were accidentally muted before. It was to block me out.
Okay. Annually, we apply for the CIP grant, which is a community initiatives program, programming, and then the AFA grant as well, which is a funding based on performers. So you get a certain level for Alberta performers, that's a provincial grant. So a certain amount for provincial performers, a certain amount for Canadian, and a certain percentage for international, as well as a certain percentage that's related to children's performing. So we do apply for those grants as well. They are on after the fact. So we apply in January for that AFA grant, as well as the CIP grant we've applied for already, but we don't know whether we will, how much we would receive back from that yet. We might find out in August. It kind of depends. It's different each year. But yes, so we do apply for both of those funding grants. We're looking into another one I can't remember the name of. I think it might be a community development grant. No, it's a federal grant, but I can't remember the name of it. And then we also do casino fundraising. So this year we did in January, I believe, hold one of the casinos in Edmonton in St. Albert, which provides some funding that we're able to use towards the festival. And then our sponsorship in general, our sponsorship gathering, which Carol spearhead.
Right, thank you for that. I was gonna ask if you had recently had a casino, and it sounds like this year, so you will be on a rotation for probably 3 years from now, 2.5 to 3 years.
I think it sounds like 2 years from what we've gathered. We had planned to have one during the COVID stuff. At the beginning, we were scheduled to have one, but then we couldn't do it. So our funding has kind of been a little funny in the last couple of years because of that. So, yeah.
Great, thank you for that.
If I may, I'll come to you, Councillor Demota. Just in terms of process, have you approached community development with respect to waiving fees? It seems to me that in most cases, and I fault you for being here, and I appreciate the letter and that you are here, but we do have some policies that would be applicable, I think, and if you have exceeded the value at which community development might be able to waive fees, that would be important information for us to know. So council certainly can get involved, but initially I would have thought that you would approach community development and find out what the fees were going to be for the field and perhaps for the chairs, and see whether you could work out a deal. And if your ask was beyond their means, then administration would come to council and give us a bit of a briefing note saying, here's why it's before council. So have those steps in fact occurred and we just don't know about it? Where do we stand on that?
We did apply for the community development grant and we did not receive it.
Okay, that is the grant. I
Okay.
recognize that, but my understanding is under our procedures and policies,
Yeah.
community development could waive fees. So has there
Okay.
been a request to waive fees? Do we know what the fee is? You've asked that we
Yeah.
waive rental fees.
The rental fee is just over $1,100. And then the tables and chairs, we haven't been quoted yet because we haven't determined the number that we require. So it was just over 1,100. I don't believe that we have, Kristen Murphy normally has approached most of the municipality and things, so I'm not certain exactly what has happened.
I wonder, Mr. Gibbon, can you help us? So I thought there was like a $2,000 or $2,500 limit for community development, and this seems to be within that. So I'm just wondering, does it need to be here for that?
Your worship, I appreciate the group is probably taking the most direct route to get to council, which is always welcome. And if council wanted to refer this matter to administration for follow-up within approved policies and procedure, we would be happy to do that. And I believe you're correct. The ability to waive the rental fee is within administration's authority. We do have a policy for that under F-104. We just put together a bit of a roles and responsibilities document. It's very light. But absolutely, this is something that is within administration's authority. I don't know whether this has gone to administration first, and it wouldn't be unreasonable for the group to say, we're going to go to council, and council can tell us where to go. And if council is saying, send it to staff, that's absolutely fine. We can absolutely manage it that way.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota?
Yeah, no, when I appreciate it, sir. When I first read it and saw that the $1,100 is there under commemoration part, I assumed that the tables and chairs were included in that, but because did you, oh, okay, so that's the extra, the 900 estimate, but you haven't used that since last year, which was at $853.65. that was just for one
One
day.
day, yeah.
Right, so we can assume that it's gonna be double that and a little bit higher, so they might be out of the $2,500 range on that. I guess, like, I appreciate it coming forward now, but would we be asking again to come back at budget time when we're doing that? Like, usually our procedure's been that we invite external groups to come and present during budget time for the future asks of the next budget, but could we consider this already as part of that 24 presentation so they don't have to come back? And second of all, you know, well, maybe we should, because if the waiver is going to be asked if it's over $2,500 for next year, then maybe it's a good idea to have that come back. I'm not sure. But I do want to say that I'm impressed with the sponsorship package, and I was just curious if you had that built within your team, or did you go externally to have that made for you?
We've developed it ourselves, and it's changed a little bit over the years, as far as the values and that sort of thing. But yes, it was developed by our team.
Good job.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. If I recall correctly, when we gave out the development grant funding, that was maybe 6 weeks ago, this group did ask administration for a waiving of this and was directed to apply for that development grant. Because I remember Councillor Wilson had, when the grants were handed out, had asked Director Reed, and Director Reed did, in fact, like on record, say the group could come and ask council to waive these fees. So I do think they asked and were denied, and then were told to go through the development grant fund and didn't meet the requirements at that time. So if I recall correctly, that is what was said at that meeting. Yeah. And I think as far as future consideration for sponsorship for next year, that could just be directed to budget to be considered at budget, could it not?
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Kelleher.
I believe with going for that fund, they have to have the festival first, and then it's if they break even and they have no money to pay for it, then it's considered in that policy. So the festival, you go, you pay the money, go to the festival, and then you can come back, and then it goes to that policy. And if you didn't break even, then you may receive the money.
Councillor Wilson and then Councillor DeMoto.
Well, I know you two ladies are maybe relatively new to the board. I know not relatively, but the festival has been going on for 10 years. I've been at every one of them, and I just remember holding my children at like games at these festivals. And the volunteer board has done an amazing job putting on a festival year in, year out. And honestly, with not a lot of support from the municipality, and I feel that should change. I think they're here asking for sponsorship, and I think we should be a diamond sponsor. I hope that we can find it $5,000 in kind. There are $1,000 in field rental, $900 in table, $1,000 in a generator. I'm looking over at Mr. Grayhead. Could we arrange that? I don't know. Do we have that in house? I feel like we should get behind this festival because they've been putting it on with only volunteer hours for a decade, and it's been amazing. It's a great celebration at the end of the season for us. It kind of co-aligns with Councillor Demota's hope for Jasper Day. Well, that is our Jasper Day. It's at the end of our really busy season, and this festival is only really for our community. I think if you tallied up the outside visitors that are coming to this, it's not a huge amount. It's our community enjoying music, and I think we should be sponsoring
the 2023 event. And I also think we should put motion forward that suggests that we speak to further support in some way for the 2024 festival as well. I won't put my motion forward just yet. I think there's a few more people that want to speak to the topic, but I would like to say that I'm in support of sponsoring the 2023 at a tune of diamond sponsor, and I think it'd be very exciting to have a member of council or a member of council on the stage, welcoming visitors, but also the community to enjoy the festivity.
Well, if he's going to be there anyway, just think that's like a good default. Great to see you hold your kids up now. No, and you know what? Really good points. And I have other ideas now about Jasper, but I still like that inclusion. But you know, I don't think we should take away from this. And you know, I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding or misrepresentation, maybe in the thought of what this would represent. Because when Mr. Reed kind of confirmed the reason why the request was denied was because they were seen as a for-profit group and not a not-for-profit society. I don't see anyone getting paid on this thing, so everyone's volunteer. So you know, I think we have to look at things a little differently in the way they're structured when it comes to that. I'm full on with Councillor Wilson in the level of support, and I think it's a good thing. You know, and maybe the fact we like it small, I'm not sure if the intent is to have more people or visitors come and join. And I think that, you know, it could be marketed a little more with the help of Tourism Jasper, and I think it already is. But, you know, we're not sure how big the group wants it to be, but I think the more the merrier. I remember when the festivals were quite large at times. Sometimes that depends on the headliner, but I think this is a great thing for our community, not just for residents, but for visitors too, because they really get a feel of what our community is all about when people are out there. Thank you.
Councillor Lash.
I just didn't want to lose sight of the fact that they also requested at the end of the letter to have a member of council sit on the committee, or in the beginning of the paragraph, they talked about a municipal representative of, maybe it could be administration or it could be council, but at the end they referred to council. So I just thought in this discussion it's important we don't lose that.
In response to your comment about tourism, Jasper, we are in conversation with them at this point and looking at ways to do a wider marketing of the festival.
And that's been related to putting more information and links towards that, hotels and activities in Jasper that people can do while they're here if they're visiting. So it's a combination of both. We do, part of why we do it in September is because things kind of start to slow down. Traditionally used to a little bit more earlier, but people are available to volunteer. Things are starting to kind of wind down from the big summer tourism rush, so the community can attend. And that's a big part of what we're doing. But we are also looking at trying to bring in some bigger bands, which cost significantly more to bring in, without raising our ticket prices so that it's not to a level where it's not affordable for families to be able to attend here. So it's a combination of the two, trying to increase the what we're offering while keeping the prices down, but looking to have funding from various places to be able to do.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I also wanted to not lose sight of the fact that you really have removed a lot of barriers for people. If you can't afford a ticket, there's an opportunity to volunteer. Admission free for children under 12 is great. I know there's that band that marches through town, and that's absolutely barrier free. Anybody can attend and watch that. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that was not lost sight.
Councillor Demota.
Well, I thought Councillor was a nice hand up for us, but I just want to say that, you know, I remember the discussion of marketing the Folk Fest when we're already full. And I understand that, but that doesn't mean that you can't market to different markets and attract different people to the community. And I think it's still worthwhile that if somebody wants to pay the hotel rates or the campground fees or whatever it is to come and experience the folk festival, just because they're not coming from Germany, or maybe they are coming from Germany or wherever to do that. I think it's a different element of what Jasper offers that can create a different type of experience when you're here. And even marketing that to the people that are already coming here, I think is important too. And I think it, like Councillor Wilson said, it's a very important part of the fabric of our community. You can see that this goes on year long. It's not something that you start up in June and then you're going full blast by September. So it does take a lot of commitment, and I believe in you know, maybe helping getting the word out a little better too. And if that comes through Diamond support, then I'm all for it.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Where to go? Sorry, where was I? Just looking through the financials, it does show that, you know, $13,000 is in volunteer hours. So fair amount of expense in volunteerism. It's great to see that many volunteers taking part, but I think if we were to become a Diamond sponsor and try to seek out you know, $5,000 in kind rather than $2,500 in cash, I think we can probably get administration to assist, or operations to assist in setup, and probably cut down a lot of those volunteer hours. You know, I know we don't want to carve out all of them, because that's one of the best things about this festival is how much volunteerism is going on there. But I guess I'll just move into making a motion, and we'll go from there. So I would like to make a motion that council sponsor the Jasper Heritage Folk and Blues Society's Jasper Folk Music Festival to the tune of either $5,000 in kind would be the I think I'd like to direct administration to try and find that, because, you know, right off the bat there's $1,000 in field rentals, et cetera, sorry to confuse this motion, but so primarily in $5,000 in kind, or $2,500 in cash for the 2023 folk music festival. That was there.
Not entirely clear to me. So your motion, let's start with the easy stuff, to receive the presentation for information, and that council commit to being a Diamond.
There might be more motions, and because I think there's a motion about $20,000 for 2024. That's not in my motion, right? And so I'm not sure we need to accept the presentation for. So, but it could. But that's making it more confusing. But no, yeah, the motion would be that council accept the presentation for information, and also support the 2023 Jasper Folk Music Festival as a Diamond sponsor, as shown in their sponsorship levels. I would like to add to it that we direct administration to find opportunities to supported to a tune of $5,000 in kind rather than the $2,500. Yet, if we can't find enough in kind ways to donate and or sponsor, then we can start with the $2,500 cash.
Debate on that motion? Everybody understands what it is. The intent of the motion is to become a diamond sponsor of the in-kind variety.
We have a lot more to give than money, I think is what I'm saying.
Great. If there's no debate, I will call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Are there any other motions to be made? Councillor Waxer.
That council direct administration to refer the request for $20,000 for the to the 2024 budget discussions.
Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Are there any further motions, Councillor DeMoto?
Just a little point of clarity, just, I'm not confused on what I voted on for the first motion, but, just for clarity, did that include the gifts and kind, did that include the tables and chairs and the rental of the field for the up to $2,500? So,
No.
what's that?
$5,000 in kind.
Okay, so it's, so five grand in kind total. Well, I just want to remind you that we decided to defer our trip to Coney. And we put $10,000 away for that in this year's budget, and and the requisition. I'm not sure if council's intention is to defer that and increase it for next year, but it's just an idea that we might have a little bit more money there too. If the administration wants to come back with that, I mean, we can use it in-house, but
The motion pretty specifically was in kind.
Mhm.
So we haven't been talking about money. If you wanted to bring that forward at another time, do that.
you might be saying in addition to.
Yeah. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just looking through notes here as to what we said about Hakone. And I think we said we would be deferring that money. So that money's earmarked for 2024. It's not free money for 2023. The way I understand the motion that we made. So I don't think we can go back to our 2023 allocation for Hakone because we've already taken it off the table and put it towards next year.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Are there any additional motions to be made with respect to the Jasper and Blues? Jasper, well, is heritage still part of the word?
Yes.
It appears
It is part
some
of
places,
the
but not other
committee,
places.
but our main event is the Folk Fest. So it's kind of, historically, we used to apply for a grant that was a heritage grant. And that was part of why that committee, so it's evolving. But yes, it is heritage technically.
So with respect to the request from the Jasper Heritage Folk and Blues Society, are there any further motions? Councillor Waxer.
Not so much a motion at this point, but perhaps a question about the membership on the committee and what the hopes are for that, and so that we understand who might be an appropriate appointment.
I think our thought behind it is to have somebody who can bring the perspective of the municipality and the information that you all know, that will help us in knowing how to navigate different things within the municipality. As primarily teachers and people who work in different areas of the town, understanding what's available and what are options for us while we're planning and would be very helpful.
Other questions, comments, motions? Councillor DeMona?
Just a comment, and just to relate this back to the UpLift Society request and the bit of a difference there. And I think as a clarifier, I think you made the point, Your Worship, that council's representation on the UpLift was to help vet the artists. And I don't think that's the intention here. So I think if there's an ask that maybe we work with administration to see if we have the resources to have somebody represent the municipality at different times, maybe not all the time when they're meeting, but just have a little bit of information resource available. But that would have to be, discussed with the CAO and see if we can apply resources to that. I think this is the best route, for my opinion.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pellegrin?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and I kind of agree with Councillor Demota there. I think somebody, because we're using Centennial Park and the chairs, it would be great if somebody from Recreation or Ops were able to go to those meetings, because then they would be able to get a clear idea from them what they need, where they need to pay stuff. I think having a councillor sit on there, or we're going to end up having to come back and ask somebody from the administration to assist with that.
Might I suggest that we refer the question of appointing either a councillor or a staff member to the board, or to otherwise assist the Jasper Heritage Folk Music and Blues Festival, whatever. Refer that to a committee of the whole meeting. I mean, it's deserving of some further consideration for sure. I don't think we'll get it done. Councillor Waxer.
I was working on a motion, which wasn't about a board member, but I haven't completed it yet, but council direct administration to appoint a staff liaison for the Jasper Heritage Folk Festival for 2020, for the 2023 years. It is coming up quickly, and it sounded like there was some confusion about municipal systems, so that at least if they had one person that would be available to answer the questions, it may be helpful.
Liaison to the Jasper Folk Music Festival or the Jasper Heritage Folk and Blues Society.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm clear with, but I think it's important to have clarity in preparation.
Well, our group would be the society, the Jasper Heritage Folk and Blues Society. The particular event would be the Jasper Folk Music Festival. So I think it would be to the society in general.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Before that motion goes forward, is it there yet? Okay, so I guess my question to administration, and not to put you on the spot, Mr. Gibbon, but Director Reed is not here and won't be here in the short term. who would you foresee working with the society to achieve the giving kind motion that was previously made?
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson at this time, I don't know. And without, you certainly raised Director Reed's absence. We do have a number of staff that are away for holidays over the summer season. That's a sort of near-term thing. And we are also undertaking the major project of the activity center renovation, which is going to require pretty substantial stakeholder engagement as we go through. So that's a good question. That said, if it's a matter of supporting the upcoming festival, we have lots of events and organizations that book facilities with us and that we work with. That's pretty straightforward. Identifying a liaison to be a part or to support the society generally in all of its activities, that an administration has no sense of what that is. That might be a bit of a different matter. So if the question was, hey, Min, can you make sure that the group understands how to talk to us about organizing and booking the facility and the venue for this year and how the municipality can help? Well, that's probably me and a couple of other staff in the community development department. If it is, can somebody regularly attend the meetings of the society and participate with them as they plan the work of the society? That gets to be a substantially different question. I don't know that that's what the group's seeking. I think they want some help right now with getting the event organized for this year. And I think that that's something, we help lots of groups all the time with organizing lots of events. So that's something certainly we can manage.
Yeah, sorry, my question was just to highlight the fact that it wouldn't just be one person where we need to identify. It's going to be all of administration, assisting in the 2023, getting those opportunities for gifting kind, getting that festival done. I don't think we need somebody, but a certain person immediately. So I'm not sure I would support your motion if it was on the table, but so I just wanted to find out a little bit more of I think Mr. Given has a good idea of what motion entailed.
Councillor Lasher.
My thought in starting that motion was just that it can be complex to find the right person. And if there was one person named, that in the absence of Director Reed, I thought it may simplify the process. Not that they would only work with that person, but just a liaison between was my thought. I'm not stuck on it.
I see our presenter has her hand up, but if I could just comment firstly, I believe I share Councillor Wilson's view. I'm concerned about naming anybody. Our system should not be that difficult to navigate, that we have to assign guides to guide residents through our own process. If Christopher Reed, our director, is away, I think organizationally his duties must fall to somebody, and there's got to be a chain of command here. So why would we have to supply guides for societies within our community to navigate our system? Other events are going on. The museum is hosting coming next month. I don't think we specifically assigned somebody to tell them how to make the system work. But there has to be a contact. I'm sure that there has been some contact. If Director Reed is not available, there must be an alternate available. So I'm just cautious about us taking a position where we assign individuals for specific roles when we have an organization where those roles should be accommodated in any of them. I'm sure you wish to speak. Ms. Lawton.
Well, I was going to say at first that yes, the focus on the Theoret Festival, I think, and just how we can approach even the field and chairs, because that was something that Kristen has spoken to somebody in the municipality about and was told no. So that's where I guess we would like to know, who do we talk to about that because the person she spoke to, it didn't go further. So that's what we're looking for right now, I think, for this year. I can't remember now what the second thing was, so.
Mr. Given and then Councillor DeMar.
Your worship, so based on that answer, it looks like the group is simply asking, can we get a discount for this year? We've got direction on that, I think, from Councillor Wilson's motion that was carried. I think that probably answers the group's need for who do we talk to. And I'm not hearing them say we need somebody to regularly talk about all the stuff that Councillor Wilson's given admin direction, identify ways to provide up to $5,000 of gift in kind support or $2,500 in cash. We'll have to look at that and we'll get back to the group, maybe a combination of the two. And that sounds like it might settle the issue for this year. I think likely what happened was a matter of interpretation. I'm not sure what this was Director Reed or somebody else in administration. But in any case, we have a couple of conflicting statements, well, not necessarily conflicting, but subjective statements in a number of our different policies and bylaws that could lead somebody to say, well, and I think this has been the nature of the discussion in the past, are you charging a fee for attendance? Yes or no? If yes, then you pay for rent. We've applied that same standard to Tourism Jasper for the Dark Sky Festival in the past, and we have waived the rent fees associated with free for entry portions of the event. But we have charged rent for portions of the event where there is a charge for people to attend. So I think that's probably been the nature of the discussion. We have a standard that I think we've previously applied to other community organizations. I think we applied that standard administratively. The group has said, and we would like to go to the ultimate authority, which is council, and that's totally fine. That's totally their right to do that. Council has given us direction, fine $5,000, give some kind and or cash. We'll go away and do that. I think it might, and so I think that possibly settles the matter for this season. The matter of an ongoing appointment to the board, referral to committee, the question of additional funds for 2024, more appropriately a budget discussion, which I think council already identified. The other maybe issue here that is a bit more broad and not related to this group specifically would be just a clarification around council's intention. Administration does have some latitude to waive fees and charges. Some of it's in procedure. There's a few statements in the fees and charges bylaw. There's a few statements in council's policy. We could probably, as an organization, clear that up to everybody's benefit. That's a matter that isn't directly related to the organization, but they probably got caught up in it in the first place here.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor DeMar.
I appreciate that and said that a lot more eloquently than I could put it. I wanted to say some of that. So I'm comfortable with what Mr. Norman said and really thank him. I really thank you for the clarity, sir. The way I look at it, and it's still my intention with other groups, other societies in the community, I would like to help set this society and the festival up for success in the future so that we don't have to have these asks. Obviously there is a gap, and that's why these wonderful people are here and we're addressing that, which is good. And Mr. Gibbons said that, there's going to be a commitment to making it a little bit more efficient for applicants or users of our facilities. So having said that, like I said about other societies, we have financial information here. It's going to come to budget. And I think that our contribution to help elevate this so that, maybe the ask in the future, we'll still get that sponsorship ask, but they'll be well enough up and running that the ask won't be as high or the needs won't be as they are now. And I think that's an important role to play for this event in our community. Thanks.
Councillor Milton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would want to do one quick thing before I go into my discussion about a council member on the board. I do want to recognize that the Free Locals Unplugged event and the one-day Jasper Folk Festival last year, given everything that had happened, was a great success, and congratulations to the committee that pulled that off. I think those were two great events. in your letter here, as I move on, there's a extension of an invitation for us to consider a councillor to have a seat on the board of the society. And I think that perhaps council should defer this discussion to appointing a board member to not only this society, but perhaps have a broader discussion at a committee of the whole as to what are the criteria for appointing members to societies. And we should have that before we go into our organizational meeting. And so it is, in fact, that would be something we would do in September or early October. And I'd leave that on the table. I'm willing to make a motion to that effect, but I'd leave other councillors to weigh in.
Other councillors? Or would you like to weigh in on the motion?
He said there wasn't a motion.
He did.
I am carrying a little extra weight, so I don't mind deferring some of that weight to the rest of council. But I'm glad that Councillor Melnick brought that up, because at our legislative committee meeting this morning, we had a discussion about these specific types of asks and whether or not they should be included in our new procedural bylaw, which will be coming forward sometime soon. But a really good discussion to have on external asks and committee appointments, whether they're internal or externally requested.
I'm going to encourage you, Councillor Melnick, to make your motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. With your encouragement, I would like to move that council defer discussion on appointing board members to societies to a future committee of the whole meeting, but prior to our organizational meeting in October. We appreciate, just speaking to that motion, I appreciate the invitation to be asked to join the society, and we do have board members on one or two other societies, but there's a reason why those are. And I think council needs to have an understanding as to what our purpose would be on those various societies before we go ahead and appoint someone. With that, I appreciate the presentation that was made, and look forward to the vote on the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Is there any further debate on that motion? Being none, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. I think that concludes responses to the request. So I think you have us at the diamond level. You will get some assistance from administration to help navigate what is left of the system for this year. We will return prior to our organizational meeting in October to consider requests to appoint someone, either staff or council, to the society board. Is there an additional motion?
The other is to defer the consideration to budget 24.
That's right. That was the third one, that the $20,000 request would be deferred to our budget deliberations in full. So there you go. 4 motions. I hope that works for you.
So thank you for your time and your support.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank you guys for coming today. And I heard Councillor Demota earlier say maybe nice to have a councillor up on the stage welcome, but I would even think it might be nice to have the mayor up on stage for the beginning of the festival.
So committed.
He doesn't like, I know.
Put him on the side.
The last concert he went to, I know, but this could be the next concert he goes to.
All right, thank you. And thank you both for your attendance, and thank you for the letter. I would propose, councillors, to move to agenda item 6.1 and break is needed perhaps after that. And I suggest that because I am going to again recuse myself. This matter deals with UpLift, and even though it's not a monetary issue, I have in the past consistently avoided discussion about such matters. And in fact, this is a recommendation coming forward from Committee of the Whole, where I absented myself. So best practice is that I relinquish the chair to our deputy mayor and 6.1. But if you wanted to call recess at that time,
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, ladies. New business 6.1, appointment to UpLift, Jasper Music Festival Advisory Board. Jasper Mural Festival Advisory Board. I have apologies. I have music on the brain. Discussion. Councillor prepared to make motion. Councillor Demott.
Yeah, well, I think we had some extensive discussions about this the last time around, and I thought you did a really good job as chair for navigating us, and I'm ready to make a motion. There's no other information that is needed. The council appoint Councillor Wilson on an interim basis to the UpLift exclamation Jasper Mural Festival Advisory Board.
Discussion. I'll call the question all in favor. That was carried. Now I'll call a 10-minute recess and we reconvene at 2:55.
thank you for that. I will call us back to session. We are at agenda item 6.2, Jasper Recreation Complex Renovation Phase 2 Borrowing Bylaw 2023 first reading. Mr. Gibbon, did you intend to introduce this at all?
Your worship, if anybody's going to be introducing it, it would certainly be Director Malamachuk. She is our financial expert. I will say, though, that she did an admirable job of introducing the topic and seeking guidance from council at the last meeting, so I don't know that there's any introduction needed. The bylaw that's in front of you reflects the direction that was given at committee last week in regards to the terms of the borrowing, and is reflective of the project cost as we know it at this stage.
Can you confirm when the matter will be back for second reading?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. I'm just bringing up the last agenda. It was highlighted in there because we have to advertise the 2 times. It will go on the July 27th advertising date as well as the August 3rd advertising date. And then I will bring it up just shortly here. Sorry, it's not stored in the Rolodex.
Rolodex. Right. The biggest step. And we are going to.
Second reading is September 5th for both of the bylaws.
And so, assuming that there is first reading today, the bylaw as read the first time is the bylaw that would be advertised, right?
Correct. It would be, it's mentioned within the ad that's placed within the the advertisement that goes out. So it's referred back to the agenda so that the bylaws can be seen in the agenda package. So
My concern is that in terms of advertising, typically, I would be content to have a bylaw read for the first time and then propose for second reading an amendment. But in this case, if it is the bylaw is read the first time that it's advertised, what is the opportunity for an amendment at second reading? And does that then put us back in a position where we would have to re-advertise because it might be a slightly different bylaw?
off the cuff, I'm thinking that if it was significant, it might change. But if it was just in say, slight rewording, then I don't think it would change the intent of the bylaw. But Mr. Gibbon might have more data.
Your Worship, I think I would concur with Director Malinchuk. Amendments to the bylaw. Council retains that right until third reading is passed, finalized, subject to our, hiccup with needing superintendent sign off before third reading. Put that aside, council retains the right to amend bylaws until third reading is complete. So I don't believe that there'd be any additional advertising requirements. I think that the amount of the borrowing, unless it was materially changed, or if the amount of the borrowing was changed, that might be an area. But if we're talking about term, or length of borrowing, then those might be nuances that would be acceptable. So I don't see a reason why council would need to re-advertise for a longer period of time if there were amendments.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota?
Well, I'm wondering if we understand what the bylaw is and had time to review it, have in front of us, like, is it possible to have both first and second reading today? Because we could still amend, to my knowledge, before we send it off to Parks Canada for third reading.
Say advertising.
It's the advertising, but still.
Go ahead, Mr. Gibbon.
Your Worship, and so the practice that I'm familiar with, and I'll admit this is most often I'm just reading sort of updates. So the practice that I've seen in the past with respect to land use matters typically is that a council will have first reading, which is actually no debate on the material of the subject material, and a motion for second reading, and then to set date, time, and location for third reading. The principle there is to ensure that the public's aware of the content that is going to be considered by council. If there's a concern about that, then certainly we could review the matter and bring additional advice to council. Again, the intent of bringing it to committee last week was to ensure that we, had the concurrence of council, while acknowledging that it's the body of council, not committee, that gets to decide these matters and retains full right to amend bylaws as they see fit. As administration will follow council's lead and ensure any legislative requirements under the act are met.
Thank you for that. Ms. Melchek, did you wish to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only thing that I was going to bring up was that we do have to advertise before the second reading for in regards to the Municipal Government Act.
So that's why, generally, you'll see the first and second reading occur with many other bylaws, but that's one reason that we're just bringing it to council for first reading now to advertise before the second reading occurs.
Thank you for that. And so that is the response to Councillor Imota's question. I was similarly concerned about that. So the matter is proposed here for first reading. I will construct this. Well, I would look for a motion to read the bylaw to first reading. Councillor Wilson.
I would make the motion that council give first reading to the Jasper Recreation Complex Renovation Phase 2 borrowing. Bylaw. 2022.
Thank you for that. I am now in a position where I am going to relinquish chair once again because I wish to make a motion to amend. So your motion is to give the first reading, so I will relinquish the chair to the deputy mayor and I will make a different motion. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that the bylaw presented for first reading be amended to delete in the third line of section 5.1 the words 20 years and to insert there for the words 30 years, and that all references to 20 years in the clauses in the preamble be similarly amended. So the intent of the motion, and I appreciate that this is last week's discussion, I voted against the motion on the basis that I was inclined to view, and I continue to be inclined to view, that a longer term is appropriate. And so if we are going to advertise a bylaw, I would like at least to be able to state my position clearly that I think the term of the borrowing should be longer. And I say that because I continue to be concerned that of all our strategic priorities, I think the one that impacts most people is our commitment to take proactive steps to reduce the risk of people becoming vulnerable. And I think that ultimately the cost of borrowing will be translated to an increase in the tax levy. And at $537,000 for this particular borrowing on an annual basis, that is very near 6%. That leaves council very little room to maneuver when we look at all the other things. Today, we just push another $20,000 to the budget. I think we start at something like a 6% increase before we've even come to our budget discussions. And I can't imagine the number of things that we have already pushed off to budget discussions for more increases. Our residents, and particularly the most vulnerable among them, are already facing hardship from a multitude of sources, including, of course, housing costs, utilities, groceries, fuel. All these things are going up, and we are proposing to add to it the cost of borrowing. I fully agree that we should borrow the money and fix the facility. That's the best thing for the community. But I think there's a way to do it by cushioning the blow to our residents. And again, considering the most vulnerable among them. A week or two ago, I went by the lineup at the food bank, and it is long. So can we achieve both goals? Can we fix the facility, enhance opportunities and facilities for engagement, at the same time reducing the risk of vulnerability. I think we can. It comes with a cost, of course. The cost of interest over time is significant. But if I was advising a client with respect to a mortgage, I would say get the mortgage that you can afford without going broke. And I think that our community is not significantly different. So my inclination is, despite the overall cost in terms of affordability, I think it is worth considering a longer term. And so I think we should be looking at replacing the 20-year term with the 30-year term, just to cushion the blow, because I don't know where things are going. And inflation appears to be on a downward trend, but Jasper's a bit of a bubble, and housing costs continue to rise, and our residents are challenged. And ultimately, I think tax rates are reflected in rents, and of course, they're reflected in property taxes. And I think that this is a risk that we put on our residents. So I leave it there, but that is my motion. And just to save myself, I will make a similar motion later, but I won't repeat all of this for the one for the wastewater treatment plant. But in that case, the same thing, rather than 15, I think we should go to 20. And these are facilities that are going to last longer than 20 years, at least the arena. That is at least a 30-year project. And so to defer the cost and spread it over a 30-year user group seems to me to be an equitable way to treat matters. So I appreciate that council made a motion to recommend that we have administration create a bylaw that said 20 years. But this is the last chance I will get to speak to the matter. And so I speak in favor of what I believe to be an approach that will protect our residents who are going to be hurt. And it also protects council, because if we are starting at a 6% increase in our, at least presumably in our tax levy, and we haven't even looked at a bunch of the stuff that we want to look at, what latitude will we have? I think it's significant. In terms of dollars, I think that going from 20 to 25 years increases or decreases the annual payment by 102,000, and going to 30 years decreases it by 168,000. So it's approaching 2%, but that's 2% that we might find that we absolutely need to accommodate other interests. So that's it's $168,000 annual saving, which may not seem significant, but it's the difference between maybe make or break it for some of our residents. So that is my motion, and that is my demands for motion.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Council discussion on the motion. Councillor Demona.
Well, you're a very persuasive pitcher. And, you know, I did contemplate this quite a bit, because it's an exorbitant amount of money when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. And, you know, last week I talked about the tax split and the burden that it is on business as well as the residents. And, you know, I did talk about somebody that saw a 22% swing on their tax from the year before. And I totally understand that, but we're also held with the responsibility, the fiscal responsibility too, of like the overall cost of this project going up. And we're already at pushing $27 million with the interest in there. And the big dilemma I have is extending it to 30 years will accrue interest at the same amount of that whole project extension is already. So another 11.5 million on top. So we're doubling that expense in the grand scheme of things. So yes, we might be saving some money. And I really appreciate where you're coming from, because it's a well thought out point of view. And from the other side, I don't think that it's responsible to spend even that much more in the grand scheme of things. So your argument is very compelling to me. It makes some sense, but it doesn't make sense to me when I look at the overall picture. And I get it. I mean, there's going to be some vulnerable situations, and you know, and that position, like you said, presumably means that we're going to be starting with this 6% increase. But if we are actually looking at a priority-based budget discussion, you know, are there areas where we need to be cutting back? And, you know, we haven't really delved into that as deep as I think we can. I think that regarding the climate, this is probably the worst time economically, you know, as far as we're concerned nationally, and the affordability of anything right now globally. A really bad time to be doing a project, but it's here in front of us. I don't think we can ask anyone to drop the tools right now and walk away, and we're just going to put this off the budget time. So we made a decision, where a recommendation's in front of us, and for me, I think I would like to stick with the original proposal recommendation, and I probably will be voting against your motion, your worship, unless I can be convinced otherwise.
Discussion? Councillor Wilson.
Mr. Given had his hand up.
Sorry, Mr.
Yeah, thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. I know that Director Nadon is on Zoom and is our ledge expert. I just wonder if she could consult us a bit on what our advertising requirements are and where we may introduce amendments. And so, Director Nadon, if you'd like to come on Zoom, we can maybe discuss that. I know that there's a bit of discussion of whether is a bylaw actually open for amendment if it hasn't been introduced. So first reading is actually to introduce the matter. And so can you actually amend something that hasn't been introduced? I'm not sure that you can. And then we have a bit of a question, and Director Nadon has a MVA reference number, but where we have to do public advertising. And so I just would like to get that consultation, make sure that whatever the decision is, and again, not commenting on the merits of any particular decision, that we do the right process. And I would also just acknowledge that if there's a change in the amendment of the bylaw, then it actually changes a bunch of other things. You can't just change the term because it changes the total cost of borrowing and other things that are calculated in the bylaw. So we'd have to, the council can vote their intention. Administration can amend the bylaw as required to fulfill whatever intention carries the day of the vote, but we should make sure that process is correct. And I'll go to Director Nadon to give us a bit of a reference on what she's seeing with the MGA.
Director Nadon.
Thank you, Theo Given, Mayor and Council. It's good to see you again. Yes, so we're quite aware of our advertising requirements because we're dealing with a similar matter for the creation of the municipally controlled corporation. And essentially, so it's section 606 in the Municipal Government Act, so our requirements for advertising. And essentially it outlines where the notice must be posted, the timelines for it. And section 606 sub 3 is a notice of a proposed bylaw must be advertised under subsection 2 before second reading. So I take that to mean that first reading has to happen, so there is a clear statement of the general purpose of the proposed bylaw. So until that bylaw is on the table for first reading, modifications are possible. But once that first reading has occurred, then part of our advertising requirement is to provide that statement of general purpose of the proposed bylaw, which would be the borrowing for the specific facilities that are outlined. And other requirements include things like where people can view a copy of the bylaw, how they can file a petition in respect of it. So if they have opinions or comments they wish to forward to council, and in the case of a public hearing, a date or a time. So in essence, my understanding of the MGA requirements for advertising are that we do need first reading. So there is a clear item that is being proposed that the public can review and then provide feedback on potentially. I think that does not preclude council from making further amendments at second reading or after the advertisement has taken place, because that would not change the statement of general purpose of the bylaw. What council may be dealing with here, as Mr. Given outlined, are complications around changing some of the content at this stage might impact the numbers. So that's a question for Mrs. Malachek, but that is what I can provide for the requirements for advertising.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowman. Councillor Wilson, you had your hand up.
Yes, sorry, get back to it. I don't disagree with Mayor Ireland. I would like to take 30 years to pay this thing. It'd be easier on the taxpayer. Yet it says in the bylaw that the lifespan of these renovations is projected to be 20 years. Mayor Ireland suggested, oh, way longer, but who has told us that, you know, the sorry, I'll just find it. Who has suggested to administration that 20 years is a good idea of how long the renovations will last? I agree they may last longer, but I don't want to be paying for something that in 20 years does need work on. And you know, we could kind of forecast that they're going to last longer, but again, we don't know that. The engineers, I guess, would know that, who have probably consulted with the administration to the life. Yeah, okay. So here it says this estimated lifetime of the project financed under this bylaw is equal to or in excess of 20 years. I think if it were safe to say 30, then it would say 30. And I don't want to be borrowing money for a project that future generations are going to still be paying for. I think we wanted it. Council voted for this project and all of the bells and whistles. And I think the taxpayer of the day should pay for the bells and whistles. And we had the opportunity to scale the project back, yet we didn't. If we were looking at budget constraints, and I think we should have done that then, not now. And I don't think we should be putting it on future generations paying taxes or paying the debt of a project that may or may not last more than 20 years.
Councillor Demotte.
I'm not trying to speak again on those other councillors. I have a question for administration. Just for the purpose of the first reading and then it being publicized and advertised. This is an opportunity again for the community to give feedback on the bylaw. That's why we're advertising it. And if we get boring sentiment or a petition or whatever it is that's against it, that even though it might be the 11th hour almost, we've had a lot of opportunity for this to be advertised. I've got a little bit of feedback from residents in the community, but nothing's come forward officially that I've seen. I'm not sure if administration's seen anything, but this will put it out there. It'll be advertised, and then it might generate some response, and we might hear that the mayor's right. We might hear that we're right, or we're right. As the recommendation came forward, we'll have to see how this goes, but we'll get to see either way how the bylaw comes out, gets responded to. And I did have another comment to make about something that the mayor said, but I don't want to speak out through.
Thank you, Councillor Demotte. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Eppy. I've taken a look back at our committee meeting that we first discussed the bylaw and the 20 years borrowing the 11.5. Our interest payable over the term will be almost $7 million. if we extend that to 30 years, I believe that the interest will probably end up being about $11 million. So we're going to be basically paying $4 million more. Yes, we're going to reduce the payment in the short term, but not really the short term. We're prolonging how long we're making that payment. It kind of reminds me of getting that MasterCard bill where it says if you make the minimum $10 payment, you'll pay this off in 77 years. And I don't know if that's where we want to be with the interest rates where they are today. These are going to be among the highest interest rates that we have in our debt. We do have future debt that we're going to be taking on as well, I'm sure. And we'll have some debt that'll be retiring, and we'll slowly be getting back probably $1 million a year in debt repayment. So we'll be building again to be able to borrow. But I don't like the idea of that amount of interest. Basically, half of the payments we're going to make over the 30 years are going to be in interest. I'd rather pay more and be more frugal with other expenses that we have that we should maybe reflect on to protect the most vulnerable. We have other things that are before us, and we considered a transportation system where we have $400,000 that we're going to be potentially putting out every year. That may not be the best use of money when we take a look at, overall, what are we trying to do for our residents as a whole. Personally, I think keeping it at the 20-year term is going to be difficult, but it will restrict us over time with what we can afford. We may have to realize that we can't be all things to all people, but certainly paying $11 million over 30 years for an $11 million project doesn't make sense to me.
For discussion? Mayor Adams?
If I can close debate then, Deputy Mayor, and I won't go into the arguments again, but just on the process matter, as mentioned, I think by Mr. Given, I can just conceive of no other alternative. There is a motion on the table for first reading of a bylaw that is in a draft form. And that is what is going to be advertised. So having given the matter much thought, I could see of no other opportunity where I could introduce a motion, given that we are required by law to advertise. I think our residents are entitled to know exactly what the bylaw is going to look like. And so if there is a procedural confusion, it is because I am trying to wedge myself into an unusual spot where typically this would have come for first reading. And I would have voted in favor of first reading because I fully appreciate that we need a borrowing bylaw to finance this project. And no part of my argument is against the expenditure. It's just about the term of repayment. But there is, from my perspective, no other alternative for me to raise my concern except at this juncture. And that's fair. And I have made my argument and others have made theirs, and that's all well with me. But I could see no other alternative but this opportunity to propose an amendment, and Council can use it chooses.
Thank you, Mayor Adams. Any other date before I call the amendment motion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion did not carry. Now we'll go back to the original motion. And I'll turn the chair back to Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the motion before Council is to give first reading to bylaw number 256, the recreation Jasper Recreation Complex Renovation Phase 2 borrowing bylaw, as it has been presented to council and is in the agenda. Is there any debate on the motion for first reading? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Your worship. Sorry, I was trying not to speak first. I was given the opportunity to other councillors. Because I feel like I've been talking a lot today, and pardon the interruption. I wanted to make the comment again that, you know, I really appreciated the avenue you were taking. I think it puts a bit of a toll on the rest of us, you know, because you are ultimately our leader. So, again, this is a big undertaking for the municipality, and just as you said with your other comment, if you were going to give your professional advice to someone that was going to take on a mortgage, or we're getting our advice from the administration, and their best advice was to go in this route. And not that I always meet eye to eye, but I think this to me was our best approach. And you know, I'm glad that you made that comment, because I think that it's relatable and to administration as well. So I wanted to say that at least and support part of the direction that we're getting here.
Councillor Wilson.
Maybe take the opportunity to close that. Yeah, so I made the motion in solidarity with council. I didn't support the project as it was. I didn't support the project growing in cost. But I put the motion forward because once a decision is made, you jump on with council and you move forward. I think this has got to be a warning though for council. Free money, there's never free money. So this project started with an accessibility grant, put an elevator in and maybe a couple accessible change rooms. And that project was a third the cost of it as it is now. So we got a whole bunch of free money, $9 million, I think it was. Yet it's costing the taxpayer, greatly. Like that's the reality of moving into a project that we may or may not need. I know that the building does need work, but we might be doing work in areas that services accessibility grant. Whereas if we identified certain areas, we may have been able to slim down our spending on this project. Again, it's my motion. I'm behind council now, but we do have to realize that there is never a free money. It's always going to cost us. So we really have to look at projects with a fine-tooth comb and ask ourselves: do we really need 8 dressing rooms or whatever it is? I know it's not 8, but do we really need it? And anyway, scale back some spending here in the future. Before one.
All right, you introduced that as closing debate. I will accept it as having closed debate. And so I will call the question, and the question that is being called is first reading of bylaw number 255. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Wow. That takes us to agenda item 6.3, which is sort of the companion piece, the Wastewater Treatment Facilities Borrowing Bylaw 2023. Again, for first reading and subject to the same advertising requirements and a return to council September 5th for second reading is the anticipation. Is there a motion with respect to first reading of this bylaw? Councillor Melvin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would make the motion that council give first reading to the wastewater treatment facilities borrowing bylaw for 2023. bylaw number 2023.
I think it is bylaw 255. That is, it is bylaw 2023.
Correct.
Hitting the year.
Yeah.
All right. Again, I will accept the motion and relinquish the chair to the deputy mayor.
Head Mayor Island.
And again, I would make a motion to amend bylaw 255, which is now subject to first reading, to replace the terminology referring to 15 years with terminology reflecting a 20-year repayment window with all of the necessary subsequent amendments. And again, same argument, so I won't repeat it. But again, it's just, and this is less because it's a much lesser amount, so less impact, but the same principles at play.
Thank you, Mayor Island. Debate. Councillor Wilson.
Mayor Ellen, you may be able to answer this question. I think the administration may not have been around. When we did the first wastewater treatment plant or the wastewater treatment plant, how many years ago was it? And is this the first real large contribute or upgrade financially to that facility?
The initial Jasper wastewater treatment plant was under design before we achieved local government. It was one of the first projects along the emergency services building that council undertook, and that was in about 2021. So it's lasted 22 years, which, and admittedly, we knew going in it had about a 20-year lifespan, so it's very close to that. I think we did spend some significant money on the primary clarifier and an exfiltration basin at one time, but they were also in the nature of upgrades rather than renovations. So again, I think that a 20-year lifespan for what we were doing is not unwarranted and could be achieved. And again, with a cost in terms of overall interest, but a benefit in terms of reducing the stress on local taxpayers on an annual basis.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kellerhanby, and to the mayor's surprise, I will speak in favor of this amendment. The change would mean that we'll be paying $40,000 annually, but for the additional 5 years, the net impact will be around $450,000 more in interest. It does achieve part of the goal of reducing the amount of additional annual tax that we'll have. This should actually be coming out of our reserves. So really what we're doing is we're just taking less out of our reserves over the course of the 20 years that this would then extend to. I do appreciate that there still will be an implication for us in our utility fees to continue to replenish the reserves. But certainly I understand and appreciate where his worship is going with this change to a 20-year term. And we have all the numbers in front of us up on the July 11th committee of the whole meeting. So as I said, I would vote in favor of this.
Councillor Donato.
I did want to clarify that this will be coming out of utilities, and again, just to support and reemphasize the fact that we have some revenue streams that are coming on board that weren't factored into the budget just yet, and with the hope of those things coming on board this fall, I still feel like I did last week that that revenue could help subsidize some of the future cost implications to the users, whether it's going to be towards capital or consumption, or the other C. Those things do leave me connecting. But as far as capital and consumption goes, again, focusing on user pay, tourism impact on a municipality, and using that external or alternate source of revenue to help alleviate some of the burden on residents, I think is applicable here. And I'm still within the 15-year limit supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimona. Any other debate? Around which let's close. Thank you. All the question, all in favor? That is carried.
One opposed. One opposed.
One opposed. And I'll turn the chair to you.
I'm sorry, who made the motion? You made the motion?
To amend.
No, I made the
Oh, you
motion
mentioned to amend. I made the motion.
for first reading, so
Right.
we are now looking at first reading of an amended bylaw, and so I turn now to administration because I have caused nothing but grief for them. But assuming that we call the question now on the motion amended to read a 20-year term rather than 15, it will entail some additional work, but it's clear enough what the motion is.
Your worship, the motion is clear. Administration will revise the bylaw and then ensure that the correct bylaw terms as amended are the ones that are advertised to the public.
So the question before us is first reading of bylaw number 255, being a bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the council to incur indebtedness by the issuance of debenture in the amount of $2,650,000 for the purposes of wastewater treatment facilities, renovations and upgrades in the municipality of Jasper, amended to reflect a term of repayment of 20 years. Any debate on that motion for first reading of that amended bylaw? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Which takes us now to agenda item 6.4, which was added as a discussion topic. Councillor Demota.
Correct. We have a recess. Just kidding. Thank you.
If it is the will of council for a recess, that's
No, I'm good. I'd rather carry on and I feel guilty. Just extending the meeting today for the group's sake. Last week, we had a motion at committee that directed administration to revise identified contract provisions, but then at the end of that, for the contract that I don't know, really recommended, or this is where I'm at, because we directed administration to complete a contract with PW Transit Canada. And I don't think that within our existing procedure bylaw that we were on side with that, because under 20.0 in the procedure bylaw and the rules of committee of the whole, 20.15 states that other than motions to approve the agenda, adopt minutes, and to adjourn, the only motions permitted at committee of the whole are, and then to follow up, I'm not going to read out all the numbers, to adopt reports or recommendations and to recommend amendments, to amend its own reports or recommendations, to meet in camera and subsequently to revert to a meeting held in public, to rise without reporting, to rise and report, and finally to recess. So I didn't feel that what we did last week included any of that. And I wanted to see how the rest of you felt about our motion last week.
If I may speak first, and recognizing two things. Firstly, it was my motion, which was presented to committee, and it was the deputy's mayor who was chairing the meeting. So subject to whatever the deputy mayor may choose to say, I will tell you how I view it. We were presented last week with a request for decision with a recommendation that committee direct administration to complete the 3-year transit system operation contract with PW Transit as proposed. Of the things that committee can do, the first one that you mentioned is to adopt reports or recommendations. So we could have, as committee, adopted that recommendation. That first bullet also allows us to not only adopt reports or recommendations, but to recommend amendments. And I think that's what we did. We had a recommendation to direct administration to complete a document as proposed. And what we said was, we will direct you to complete a revised document. So that's an amendment. So from my perspective, we were within the requirements of the procedural bylaw, but that is open to debate.
Well, so and this is where interpretation is between recommend, adopt, and approve. So we can recommend, we can adopt reports or recommendations and to recommend amendments, but we can't approve amendments. So this is where the conflict is, and it's all an interpretation. But we approved an amendment. We're not recommending for approval to council.
No, it was a direction to administration. Adopting an amended recommendation from administration. That is the way I read it. But other councillors are welcome to be included in the discussion. I will go first, Councillor Melnick, and then Councillor Keller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my question to you and to administration would be if we directed administration to do something, but that was not accepted, does that mean that since our recommendation wasn't accepted, it would come back to committee to reconsider an alternative to one of the things we asked to be changed? Or would it just be go ahead in the contract? So we asked for specific things. It sounds like we're not going to have an opportunity, if those aren't accepted, to have another look at the contract before it's finalized. That's where I think this is where perhaps Councillor Demota is going, is that directed to do this. If everything is 100%, should be fine. But if something isn't 100%, council has the right to know before we enter into a contract that what we directed wasn't completed.
I would agree with that. So we directed administration to complete the contract subject to some revised terms. If they are unable to complete that contract with those revised terms, I think they have to come back to us and say, we couldn't do that. The other side wouldn't agree. Give us further direction. I would agree with that interpretation. I don't know where they're at right now in terms of fulfilling the direction that we gave them. But certainly I would expect that if they can't fulfill the direction, then they have to come back. And we can ask Mr. Given, but that's how I would interpret it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification. The whether committee can direct or council should direct is, I guess, the other question that's at play here.
You, Councillor Delahanty?
And I do apologize. I missed that last week. Like, I think in my head, I thought it was coming back to today for approval by council. Like, we also moved that Councillor Wilson sit on the UpLift Mural committee, but it came back today for approval. Most things that we moved at committee come back. And so in my mind, as the chair last week, I presumed this was coming back today for approval of council. And I do apologize that I didn't say this will come back next week for approval. And that's kind of, you know, every time we kind of make a decision at committee, we move it to council. We recommend, we direct, but it comes back to approval.
Again, if I just speak to that and question interpretation. I think you are right in terms of council directing itself. So at committee, council as council doesn't make final decisions. We make recommendations, and sitting as council in a regular meeting, we complete the recommendations we give to ourselves. But it is not uncommon at all that in committee we direct administration to do things. So there's a difference between directing ourselves and directing administration. That's my interpretation of procedural rules. Councillor Dumont.
Well, something similar happened today at the legislative committee meeting where a motion was made and two people understood it one way and two people understood it the other way. And last week, you know, sometimes as a councillor, I get very wound up in my position. And when I think we're going in the wrong direction, in my own personal view, I tend to get a little heated, and my best effort to keep that calm. I think my focus on the overall issue going forward was the intention of it coming back for today's discussion, as Councillor Keller MP had mentioned. I felt the same. And it wasn't until after, when I was going over what we talked about today, that you know, I wanted to go back to the procedure bylaw and go like, you know, is it coming back? And then when it wasn't on the agenda for today, like I don't want to cause more drama on this issue. And it wasn't, I'm not doing this out of spite, and I just want to say that. But for me, I felt that it was something completely different than we normally do things. And I don't want to fault administration, because I don't feel that they intentionally put anybody in this position. I feel that even with the wording within the bylaw, that we're trying to interpret it to help us get around this. And I don't think that we, under any other circumstances, that we would do that to another motion that we would have put forward. So again, it's like, we adopt reports or recommendations. We can adopt a recommendation, but you know, I think the intent of that thing is to complete the contract. Does that mean complete and have the contract signed? Is that what complete means? Because if we're doing that, then again, I think that we're offside. And I'm not gonna flog this if it's considered dead by council. I'm going to dismount. So I'm not gonna berate it any further.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I voted in favor of the motion last week, but I also did think it was coming back today because I did plan on speaking to it. So that was what I understood last week as well.
Councillor Wilson.
I wasn't expecting it back. I originally, the motion was that this is maybe 2 months ago, or was to enter into a contract with BWT, and that was approved at council. The fine tunings of it, which there have been some, maybe some direction to administration to come back with, a few things, and it has come back. How many times does it have to come back to us? I don't think with other contracts, they bring back, small items. If administration can meet with the contractor on all the direction that we've given them last week, why would it come back to us?
Councillor Mallon.
Yeah, I think that the Councillor Wilson makes a good point. If the contractor did agree to all of the changes, if the contractor didn't agree to all of the changes, and then I'll go just using one as an example, if the time required for notice of convenience wasn't reduced by 90 days, then that would be a $150,000 hit to the community more, meaning that we would have to extend the service for 6 months until we paid the $5,000 to terminate, as opposed to paying for the service for only 90 days. That's what the impact is. We are getting the service, but it means that it prolongs it longer. And I think that was the intention of that clause, was if we realize that we want to terminate, let's minimize the amount of cost to the community. So in saying that, sorry, I would have expected it to come back.
Would you have expected it to go back if the contractor just said yes to everything?
To my understanding, and I think I may have even asked the question specifically, will we see this contract back? And I think the administration said or indicated that it would not come back if these three terms were negotiated in the spirit of what committee directed administration to do.
I agree. I think I heard this. Yeah. Well, I might ask Mr. Gibbon about the status of contract discussions as of today.
Your worship, recognizing that this was a week ago, administration's been in contact with the contractor. We are meeting this week, and we've had correspondence back and forth about some of the terms the council identified, and we're going to meet on Friday to discuss those terms and what they could look like.
Councillor Demoda, you brought the matter forward. Do you have a motion to make?
Well, I'm not sure how we can make a motion now. Because I feel really awkward here. And the fact that other councillors perceive things the same way as me, where does that leave us at? And it's the same frustration that I had when we approved the contract to go forward with the contract, but then yet admitted that the process was flawed and we're going to review the process. So I'm at the same level of frustration, and I'm not doing this out of spite again, or being a stick in the mud. It's the frustration of process. And I don't know what type of motion you can make at this juncture. So again, like maybe the whole, I like to use the term spitballing, and I'm trying to maybe gather some consensus or collective resolution here, because several of us admitted again that we interpreted something differently. So what do we do from here in this situation?
Deputy Mayor Kelleher.
So if Mr. CEO given his meeting with the contractor on Friday, maybe it goes on the future agenda, but it comes back to council for final approval. If all the terms are met.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kelleher. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. To be clear, I didn't expect the contract to come back to us. I expected it to come back to council for approval. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. My question for administration is, if the provider doesn't agree to the new terms, what happens next?
Your worship, so the question, I think, really comes down to what the council move. And at the meeting, the motion of council, which is in our package in the minutes, was to ensure that there's alignment between any funding agreements and the municipality, between the municipality and Grand Yellowhead, both the school division and the service contract and the service provider. So on that provision, I think it really is that the municipality will ensure that any agreement between municipality and Grand Yellowhead is reflected in the contract. So that's something we can adjust. The second bullet was to consider different classes of default. Actually doesn't say to establish a class of default that is specific to this particular. So there is some latitude. I think that there was a point that was raised about, well, what if some other thing that's not defined happens? And so there was direction to administration to say, well, consider if there might be other classes of default. And I guess the assumption of the unsort of stated part, and if possible, include something to reflect that. But it is not there's no met, not met measure. It does say to consider. And then to decrease the amount of time required for notice of convenience to 90 days. That's a pretty clear met, not met. So if administration wasn't able to decrease the amount of time required for notice of convenience to 90 days, then that would be the one where I would say, well, that was not able to be met, and therefore I can't enter the contract because it's contrary to the direction council gave me. The others, the Grand Yellowhead arrangement, that's pretty straightforward. We can match that because we work with Grand Yellowhead. Considering different classes of default, I think that's a discussion, and we can see if there's something we can arrange, or as I suppose as administration, I can be satisfied that that in a egregious form of default, which, I think was what the discussion was, that I would be comfortable that we have, protections for the municipality. The one that is sort of a no-go is that final point. If we can't decrease the amount of time for notice of convenience to 90 days, then I guess I would have to say, I'm sorry, I can't enter into this contract with you because council said that is the thing that must be completed.
If I can speak to expectations, my expectation was that this would not be back today, because when I started my motion that eventually was recorded and voted on, it was to direct administration to negotiate those revised terms and come back to council with a different contract for approval. And I was met with the position by administration that would effectively derail the opportunity to have anything completed in time to commence school busing in the fall. And we discussed that, I think specifically, but the YouTube video will reflect whether or not that was the case. And I somewhat reluctantly then changed my motion to the motion that was presented, which was make these changes or try and make some of these changes, but proceed with the contract so we can move forward. And that, from my perspective, not speaking for anybody else's expectation, but that was my expectation, was that we were giving administration some slightly different direction. But it included completing the contract, because otherwise there was not an opportunity to get this back before council before time ran out. There are limitations, and I, as others did, I expressed some reservations about the school bus involved, but if it's going to be part of it, and it's the only other person with money in the game right now, so we kept them in, not unanimously, of course, but in order to make something happen for this September, my understanding is that we were, in fact, giving direction to administration and that it wasn't coming back to council. So others may have thought, by past practice, it automatically would come, or that they just thought that it would. I didn't think that, but I'm only one of 7. Councillor Moore.
Well, you did make a motion, so I'm glad you know exactly what I was intending. And I do remember that reluctance, and to me, 1 week coming back today didn't mean all this other stuff that for it to come back and then derail the September startup for school busing. So to me, again, and you know, reading it, you didn't say that committee direct this to come back to council. So I mean, but again, I think this, if it was another situation, and like we've done in the past, we would have forwarded this to council. And I don't mean to insult you, Your Worship. It doesn't feel right. And I am not sure if other people in the community who might be following this agree. When we're used to other processes, I felt that this should have come forward. I apologize extremely for being a councillor with my experience and not catching that and making, or at least trying to help put a friendly amendment by getting it here today, and that I feel guilty for.
Suggestions by anyone?
Worship.
For Wilson.
Near the chair.
Who's chairing?
Oh,
Who's chair?
sorry.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
okay, okay, sorry. I was looking at you to go ahead.
I was going to ask for a 10-minute recess.
I am content to comply with that request if people need a break. You wanted to get something in?
Well, I was gonna say, if there's nothing that Councillor Demota is putting forward, I think the conversation's done. But if you feel like, you know, I don't think we need a recess if you've got something you'd like to move, and I think.
Well, Councillor Keller MP made a suggestion. I'm not going to force kids. You know what? Still, that I don't feel like, I think it should be me that makes any changes or recommendations, but I feel kind of handcuffed here. Like, I'm going up against a motion that the mayor made, and if he feels confident that we're on side, then and the administration went forward with it, and their recommendation went forward, and no one sees conflict in it, then I don't want to make a motion that's going to make the rest or everybody else uncomfortable. Because I think it should come back to us. So in what regard would that be? And then if that gets defeated, what does that say? So remember a couple of weeks ago when you were like reading the climate on a decision we were making, and you voted against what the rest of council was, and you didn't feel that you wanted to debate it because you knew it was going to go in a certain way. So I don't want to wreck something that's already been there and then insult the rest of you just by going forward with that. So maybe if it's just me that's feeling this way, and I'm just being the odd duck or the black sheep or whatever it is, then I'll just leave it to rest. But if other people are uncomfortable, then I want to hear that. If you're not, then I'm not going to go forward with making a motion.
I am going to accede to the request of Deputy Mayor Delaharenty and call a recess and consider where we stand, and we will reconvene. I will give you 11 minutes.
Thank you. I'll be there.
For 4:20, we will reconvene. All right, thank you. We were 5 minutes later getting back than we had anticipated, but matters that needed attending to were attended to, and we are now back in session. I know that Councillor Demoda has been working on crafting something for us.
Well, a couple of things, if I may, Worship. And again, I don't want to challenge you personally, but I'd like to make a motion to declare that the motion committee made at the last committee of the whole meeting on July 11th regarding the completion of the contract with PW Transit Canada was not in line with the procedural bylaw, and I challenge the decision of the chair to approve that motion as it was presented.
Thank you. I know I'm just going to check a motion to challenge the ruling of the chair is in order, although it's late because it's not a ruling that's been made now, but I'm just going to check that it is subject to debate or whether I accept that it's a proper challenge and just call the question. If you'll just give me a moment, we do have a provision specifically on that. And the rules permit that the chair can also request assistance from the CAO on such matters. And so if you can find it more quickly than I can, Mr. Gibbon, let me know. Right, I have found the reference in the section to which I referred, and so for what use it is under Schedule 2 of our procedural bylaw, which is conduct of business. Article 10 deals with challenge to ruling of the mayor. And in fairness, the challenge really in this case is a challenge to the ruling of the chair, the deputy mayor, at last meeting, that the motion that the mayor made was out of order and should have been ruled out of order by the chair. Our rules, procedure bylaw says 10.1. When a councillor wishes to challenge the ruling of the mayor, the motion that the decision of the mayor be overruled shall be made, and the question shall be put to a vote of council immediately without amendment or debate by decision of council. A vote against the motion is a vote to uphold the ruling of the mayor. So again, if it's in order, and I won't debate that right now, and we substitute the fact that it was in committee, that is where we are. And so I think your motion is that the decision of the chair, which was a decision to allow the motion to be overruled. Correct? Is that?
That is correct. We're glad you found that. And I appreciate your effort considering that the motion that was approved at that meeting was yours. I appreciate your dedication to democracy on this one.
I have some other thoughts, but the rules say that the motion is not open to debate. Although there are some other factors that perhaps ought to be considered, but well, I'm just going to call. Go ahead.
If I may just, okay, so within, because I am making reference to the procedure bylaw and it specifically only refers to ruling of the mayor. So does that include the deputy mayor?
The procedure bylaw has a definitional section that says the duties of the mayor are the duties of the deputy mayor when they're in charge. I think it's, I am going to give that part of it a very liberal interpretation and say, yes, there was, although it wasn't a direct ruling, the motion was clearly found to be in order because the motion was put to committee. So it was found to be in order, and you're saying that it ought not to have been found to be in order.
Well, and
so the motion before us then is that the rulings of the chair was out of order. Are you trying to make a point of order?
I was going to, but I wanted you to repeat the motion first and we'll make one in order after.
Regardless of the wording of the motion by Councillor Demota, if it is a challenge, the motion is that the ruling of the mayor, substitute deputy mayor, be overruled. That is the motion that you're allowed to make, and I will say that that's the motion that you're trying to make.
That's the question.
Can I confirm that's the motion?
yes.
Councillor Gallagher, deputy mayor.
Councillor Wilson was before me.
My point of order was just for clarification that a vote against the motion upheld the motion that the mayor made at last meeting.
Yes, in a roundabout way. So the motion is that the ruling of the mayor be overruled. which would mean that the motion was out of order and shouldn't have been allowed. But a vote against the motion confirms what was done.
I'm so confused. Okay, so I was chair,
Yes,
okay. And like Councillor Hall, she said, I interpreted when you made the motion that it would be back here today. So therefore, I was in the wrong.
that is not my understanding of the motion. As I understand Councillor Demota's motion, is that the motion that I made was out of order and should not have been put at all. It's not whether it was going to come back, but it was not something that committee could do. That's what he is saying. And so he is saying that the chair, which happened to be you, should have ruled my motion out of order, should never have come before council. That is what the motion is. And so again, the motion being that the decision of the mayor be overruled can be read as the decision of the deputy mayor be overruled. And sorry, I was just looking for the other wording that Councillor Wilson asked about. A vote against the motion is a vote to uphold the ruling. So a vote against the motion means that the motion was properly before committee. Doesn't speak to the merits. Councillor Baxter.
So what would happen if Councillor Demota's motion was approved? What would be the next step?
That's a very good question. We will see. We're in sort of uncharted territory, but that motion, if it should not have gone, there would be no direction to administration. And administration would be wanting a direction on a rather important thing. So I think it would be good council to give some direction immediately thereafter if the motion that is before us now is approved.
May I ask another question?
Okay.
So why can't we just put the motion back on the table? The same as last week. You know what I mean? Like, so if I made the mistake of not clarifying that we'll see this back at council next week for approval. So why can't we just bring the motion back to council today and put it back out there?
Could do that.
So I don't want to influence the decision because of what I was going to do next, but it was just to do that. And I was going to ask you to relinquish, if you were comfortable with relinquishing the chair back to, and then just have what we should have been having today. So I just, to me, the intent was to move the decision of the deputy mayor on the item 7.4 for the committee whole agenda of July 11th, 2023 be overruled. Period. Because it wasn't in my set.
I get that. And to answer your question again, we could have that motion and we could have that motion regardless of the outcome of this motion. I think. So, Councillor Hall.
My question is for you, Mayor Ellen. Earlier when this first came up, I felt you were confident that it wasn't a motion out of order last week. No, oh, there's no way. Okay. You have to make this.
I'm going to call the question. You want, on the basis that everybody now understands what the motion is? Yeah. Those in favor? Opposed? The motion is defeated. There's still an interest in pursuing the matter. I think the motion that you suggested, I would find it to be in order just to resolve this. I don't know that it's necessary, but council can do more than is necessary if they choose. So if you wish to make that motion, or somebody else, just to clear the air on this. Councillor Wilson.
Do you know, could you repeat the number of the motion?
The initial motion was number 318/23. That's from the minutes that are in today's package. So that was the motion.
Well, I would make a motion that council adopt the motion that Mayor Ireland made at Committee of the Whole meeting July 11th, number 318/23.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. So that motion effectively brings back to this table what some thought was the outcome last week anyway, that it was a recommendation to council. So the motion is before us now, not quite in the same form, but it has the same effect that it is back. So that is the motion that council adopt. The earlier motion, unusual. I will find that it is in order. I do find that it is in order, and I will invite debate on the motion. Councillor Demoter.
I think that we had fair enough debate on it, and I appreciated coming here officially for a discussion, and I'm still opposed to it for all the reasons that I spoke to last week. And I think that we should have suspended this whole conversation based on the fact that we admitted that there was a flaw in the process to begin with. And we were going forward with amending our advertising for requests for proposals. And I still feel that the process was flawed. And we wouldn't be here today if we collectively realized that. And unfortunately, there was a smaller number of councillors available to make the decision prior, but that was made, and now we're here as a group. I see even the microphone doesn't like me. We've gone too long, but I still feel that we're not in a good position to go forward. Thank you.
Any other debate? Councillor Ratcher.
Not a debate, but the question is, if this motion was defeated, what would be the next steps?
Let's find out.
I think similar to the previous related question, administration would be without direction, and it would be on council's shoulders, I think, to give some direction. I will speak to the motion if no other councillor is so inclined. I thank you, Councillor Wilson, for that motion. It takes us back to where some thought we were going to be in any event, and I appreciate that consideration. I want to speak more to Councillor Demota's concerns about process. And while I agree that process is an important issue, I would not characterize this as a flaw in the process if that is interpreted as process improperly applied. We have recognized that our process could be better, that there could be further advertising, but the process that we had before us is a process designed by council. It was conducted in accordance with a policy, and we can change that policy, and I agree that we should. But there was no flaw in the way the policy was administered, and so if it's come to light that it could be made better, it should be. But that is not a good ground, I think, to go back and start over. We will continually improve, but we can't keep backing up because we see that we could have done something better. So while I agree with the identification of procedural issues that can better allow communication with our own constituents, that's a good thing, but that's not to say that the outcome was flawed because the process could have been better. Is there any other debate on the motion? Right. The motion is that council adopt the motion previously passed by committee. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried to the same extent that it was a week ago. And we've had full debate on a number of issues, but there we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Demota, that was agenda item 6.4. I am aware of no notices of motion coming before us. Councillors' reports. Councillor Wilson.
Tomorrow we have the JCHC meeting at 1:30. That's all I have, and I haven't had any previous meetings.
Other reports? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be attending also the housing meeting, and I did attend the Jasper Yellowhead Historical Society meeting last Tuesday, July 11th. And I just want to indicate we do have one thing happening in the community, and it's more of an interest. So I'll maybe delay that point to the next topic, notable dates.
Thank you for that. Other reports? Okay. Seeing nothing, upcoming events? Something not on there, seems to me, is the meeting that we have on July 20th, the budget workshop. So councillors are informed that that is upcoming. Are there any other upcoming events? Councillor Melnick?
Today's meeting, we had a presentation by the Jasper Folk Music Festival, and they disclosed their dates to us of being September 7th to 10th, which should be added to our upcoming events.
Thank you for that. If there is nothing else, I am delighted to say that commencing earlier today at 2 p.m., in fact, the former Lord Mayor of the 600 block of Patricia Street, whose throne has moved, but whose voice still echoes down that corridor, is hosting a retirement party at Royal Canadian Legion branch number 31, and you are all invited to go over and wish Mr. Murilovich all the best in his retirement.
When's that today?
As do I. If there is nothing further in the way of upcoming events, I would invite a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Keller-Renby, thank you for that. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you all, and thank you to those who viewed us on our YouTube platform. And we are now into a recess, and I think the next public meeting will be August the 8th, which will be committee of the whole at 9:30 in the morning. So join us then. Thank you all.